They say that pain is the greatest teacher life has to offer. And sitting here now, years removed from the worst betrayal I have ever experienced, I finally understand what that means. Every lesson worth learning seems to come wrapped in suffering, disguised as heartbreak, delivered through the hands of someone you trusted with everything you had. My name is Nathan Brooks, and this is the story of how my girlfriend of 4 years betrayed me just days before Valentine's Day. How I discovered truths that shattered every belief I held about love and loyalty, and how I rebuilt myself from the ashes of that destruction while ensuring that every lie she told eventually caught up with her. These are the lessons I learned, paid for in blood and tears, and I share them now so that maybe someone else won't have to learn them the hard way. The first lesson came before I even knew I was being taught. Lesson 1. The people who claim to love you the most are sometimes the ones who see you as nothing more than a stepping stone. I met Claire Harrison at an industry networking event in Chicago when I was 26 years old. I was working as a junior architect at a mid-sized firm, putting in 80-hour weeks trying to prove myself, still carrying student loans but slowly building towards something meaningful. She was a public relations coordinator at an events company, beautiful in that effortless way that makes everyone in a room take notice. When she walked up to me and started a conversation, I genuinely couldn't believe my luck. Looking back now, I understand that luck had nothing to do with it. Claire had done her research. She knew I was on the fast track at my firm. She knew I had just been assigned to a major development project that was getting attention from influential people in Chicago's real estate scene. She knew that attaching herself to me meant access to a world she desperately wanted to enter. But I didn't see any of that at the time. All I saw was a stunning woman who laughed at my jokes and seemed genuinely interested in my dreams. Our first year together was everything I thought a relationship should be. We spent weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants, building what I believed was a genuine connection. Claire was ambitious, and I admired that about her. She talked about wanting to start her own PR firm someday, about wanting to build something significant. I supported her dreams completely, never realizing that my support was being calculated as part of her larger strategy. By our second year, we had moved in together. A nice apartment in Lincoln Park that stretched my budget but made Claire happy. She had very specific ideas about how things should look, how we should present ourselves to the world. I wrote it off as her PR background, her understanding of image and perception. I didn't recognize it for what it really was, an obsessive need to appear successful, regardless of the reality underneath. The second lesson took longer to learn but cut even deeper. Lesson 2. When someone shows you who they are through small actions, believe them the first time. The signs were there from the beginning, subtle enough to explain away but consistent enough that I should have noticed the pattern. Claire would make comments about my friends, suggesting that perhaps we should spend time with people who were more established, more connected. She would critique my wardrobe, pushing me toward more expensive brands even when I explained that my student loans meant I needed to be careful with money. She would seem disappointed when I wanted to stay home and save money rather than attend another expensive dinner party. I told myself these were just personality differences. I told myself that compromise was part of any relationship. What I didn't understand was that Claire wasn't compromising at all. She was reshaping me, bit by bit, into the version of Nathan Brooks that would be most useful to her long-term plans. The third year brought changes that felt positive at the time. I received a major promotion, becoming a senior architect with a significant salary increase. Suddenly, Claire's attitude shifted dramatically. She was more affectionate, more interested in our future together. She started talking about marriage, about the life we could build. I was so happy that I didn't stop to wonder why her enthusiasm seemed so directly tied to my professional success. That same year, I was assigned to work on a luxury residential development called Parkview Heights. It was the biggest project of my career, a collaboration between my firm and a major real estate developer. The developer was a man named Victor Langley, heir to a family fortune built on Chicago real estate over generations. He was everything I was not: old money, connected, effortlessly confident in a way that came from never having to prove himself to anyone. Claire met Victor at a project launch party I brought her to. I watched them talk for what seemed like a long time, but I didn't think anything of it. Claire was in PR. Networking was literally her job. When she mentioned that Victor had offered to help her with some contacts for her eventual business launch, I was actually grateful. I thought it was a sign that my career success was opening doors for both of us. Lesson 3 came like a sledgehammer to the chest. Lesson 3. Trust your instincts even when your heart desperately wants to ignore them. It was January, about 3 weeks before Valentine's Day, when I first felt something shift. Claire had become distant in ways that were hard to define but impossible to ignore. She was on her phone constantly, angling it away from me when she texted. She started working late more often, claiming that a major client was demanding her attention. She would come home smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't recognize, a scent too expensive for the men she claimed to be meeting with. My brother Danny was the first person to say something directly. We were having beers at his bar one evening when he looked at me with concern in his eyes and said, "Nate, something's not right with Claire. I've been watching how she acts around you versus how she acts when you're not paying attention. There's a difference, and it's not good." I got defensive. Of course I did. Danny had always been overprotective, and part of me wondered if he was just jealous of how well things seemed to be going in my life. I told him he was being paranoid. I told him that every relationship had rough patches. I told him that Claire and I were solid, that we were planning a future together. Danny just shook his head and said, "I hope you're right, big brother. But keep your eyes open, please." I should have listened. That's the thing about lessons learned the hard way. They're always obvious in hindsight. The discovery came exactly 11 days before Valentine's Day. I had planned an elaborate proposal, a ring I had saved for months to afford, a reservation at the restaurant where we had our first date, a speech I had practiced until every word was perfect. I was going to ask Claire to marry me, convinced that this would be the most romantic Valentine's Day of our lives. Instead, I came home early from work on a Tuesday afternoon. A meeting had been canceled, and I thought I would surprise Claire, maybe take her out for an early dinner. The apartment was quiet when I walked in, but I could see her purse on the counter, her keys in the bowl by the door. I heard her voice coming from the bedroom, speaking softly, intimately, in a way that made my stomach clench. I should have walked away. I should have left and pretended I hadn't heard anything. But something compelled me forward, some need to know the truth even though part of me already understood what I would find. I pushed open the bedroom door, and everything I thought I knew about my life fell apart in a single, devastating instant. Claire was on the bed with her phone pressed to her ear, but it wasn't the conversation that destroyed me. It was what she was saying, the words I overheard before she noticed I was standing there. "Victor, I told you. I'm handling it. He's proposing on Valentine's Day, which means once we're engaged, I'll have legal claim to half of everything if things go wrong. But they won't go wrong because I'll push for a quick wedding, and then we just have to wait. A year, maybe 2, and then I'll have enough leverage to walk away with a real settlement. And then you and I can finally be together properly with the resources to live the way we deserve." She turned and saw me. I watched the color drain from her face. I watched her mouth open and close, searching for words, for explanations, for the lies that had always come so easily to her. But there was nothing to say. I had heard everything I needed to hear. The fourth lesson hit me in that moment of devastation. Lesson 4. Your worth is never determined by how someone else treats you. Their betrayal reflects their character, not yours. I stood in that doorway feeling like the biggest fool who had ever lived. 4 years. 4 years of my life invested in a woman who had never seen me as anything more than a financial stepping stone. Every kiss, every intimate moment, every whispered promise had been part of a calculated plan to extract value from my existence. But even in that moment of crushing pain, something else stirred inside me. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Something colder. Something more focused. A determination that if Claire thought I was going to be a victim in her scheme, she had seriously underestimated who she was dealing with. "Nathan, please, let me explain," Claire started, her voice trembling in a performance of vulnerabilities that I could finally recognize as completely fake. "It's not what you think. Victor and I were just friends. He's been helping me with business contacts." "Stop," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "I heard what you said. Every word. You were planning to marry me for my money and then leave me for Victor Langley once you had extracted enough value." That's not a misunderstanding. That's who you are. Claire's expression shifted. The mask slipped completely, and I saw something I had never seen before in her eyes. Contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt for the man she had been pretending to love for 4 years. Fine, she said, her voice cold. You want the truth? Here it is. I was never going to stay with you, Nathan. You were always just a stepping stone to the life I actually deserve. You're a nice enough guy, but you're boring, safe, predictable. Victor is everything you could never be. He's connected, wealthy, and he's not afraid to take what he wants from the world. Including other men's girlfriends, apparently. I was never really yours, Claire shot back. I just let you think I was because it served my purposes. And honestly, this is on you for being naive enough to believe that someone like me would genuinely want someone like you. I absorbed those words like blows, each one landing with precision on the tender parts of my soul. But I didn't break. I refused to give her the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Instead, I walked to the closet, pulled out a suitcase, and began calmly packing my things. What are you doing? Claire asked, a note of surprise in her voice. She had expected tears. She had expected begging. She had expected me to react the way she had always controlled me to react. Leaving, I said simply. The lease is in my name. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I'll be staying with my brother until you're gone. You can't just... Actually, I can. The apartment is my legal responsibility. I'm choosing to let you stay for 30 days as a courtesy, but if you're not out by then, I'll have you removed. This relationship is over. Whatever game you were playing, you lost. I walked out of that apartment with one suitcase and what remained of my dignity. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. The fifth lesson emerged during the weeks that followed. Lesson 5. The best revenge is not destruction, but exposure. Let people's true nature be revealed, and let the consequences flow naturally. My brother Danny was waiting at his apartment when I showed up that night, looking like a man who had just survived a car crash. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just pulled me into a hug and said, "Whatever you need, I'm here." Over the following days, as the initial shock began to subside, I started thinking clearly about what had happened and what I should do about it. Part of me wanted to burn Claire's life to the ground. I wanted to tell everyone about her scheme, humiliate her publicly, make sure she faced maximum consequences for what she had done. But my colleague Melissa, who I had confided in about the situation, offered a different perspective. Nathan, you're hurt and angry, and you have every right to be. But going scorched earth rarely works out the way you think it will. It often makes you look like the unstable one. Instead, focus on protecting yourself legally and financially, and let the truth come out naturally. People like Claire always expose themselves eventually. Melissa was right. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the most powerful thing I could do was simply document everything and wait. Claire and Victor had been conducting their affair for what I now suspected was well over a year. Secrets like that never stay hidden forever. And when they came to light, I wanted to make sure I was positioned to benefit from the fallout rather than be caught in it. The first thing I did was consult with a lawyer. Not to sue Claire, what would I sue her for? But to understand my rights and protect my assets. It turned out that Claire had been smarter than I realized in some ways. She had been pushing for us to open joint accounts, to put her name on various documents, to intertwine our financial lives in ways that would have given her significant claims if we had married and divorced. Fortunately, I had always been somewhat cautious with money, so the damage was limited. But it was a wake-up call about how close I had come to financial ruin. The second thing I did was gather evidence. Not to use maliciously, but to protect myself if Claire tried to spin the narrative against me. I saved the text messages I had access to. I made notes about dates and times and inconsistencies I had noticed over the years. I compiled a file of everything I knew about her relationship with Victor, including the phone conversation I had overheard. The third thing I did was something that felt petty at the time, but turned out to be strategically brilliant. I reached out to Victor Langley's wife. Lesson 6 was perhaps the most satisfying to learn. Lesson 6. The truth has a way of connecting people who need each other. I had done some research and discovered that Victor was married to a woman named Catherine Langley. a quiet philanthropist who mostly stayed out of the public eye. Their marriage was rumored to be strained, but they maintained a public facade for the sake of Victor's business reputation. I debated for days about whether to contact her. It felt manipulative, like I was using her pain to advance my own agenda. But ultimately, I decided that she had a right to know what her husband was doing. If someone had done that for me, maybe I wouldn't have wasted 4 years of my life on Claire. I sent Catherine a carefully worded message through her foundation's website, explaining that I had information about her husband that she might want to know. To my surprise, she responded within hours, asking me to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. Catherine Langley was not what I expected. She was elegant, yes, and clearly from a world of wealth and privilege that I would never fully understand. But there was also a sadness in her eyes, a weariness that spoke of years spent managing disappointments. "You're not the first person to reach out about Victor's infidelities," she said quietly after I had explained the situation. "But you are the first who seemed genuinely concerned about the other woman's scheme rather than just trying to expose my husband." "I'm not trying to expose anyone," I said. "I just thought you should know, and honestly, I think your husband is being played just as much as I was. Claire sees him as a means to an end, just like she saw me. The difference is that he has more to lose." Catherine nodded slowly. "What is it that you want, Mr. Brooks?" I thought about the question carefully before answering. "I want Claire to face consequences for what she's done. Not just to me, but for the pattern of manipulation that I suspect goes back years. I want Victor to understand that his choices have implications. And I want to move on with my life without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when they're going to try to come after me." Catherine studied me for a long moment. "I think we can help each other," she said finally. "I've been planning to divorce Victor for years, but I was waiting for the right moment, the right leverage. You've just given me both." Over the following weeks, Catherine and I became unlikely allies. She had access to information about Victor's business dealings that I never could have obtained on my own. And what she discovered was far more damaging than a simple affair. Lesson 7 emerged from those discoveries. Lesson 7. Cheaters often cheat in more ways than one. People who betray those closest to them rarely limit their dishonesty to personal relationships. Victor Langley, it turned out, had been involved in a series of questionable business practices that bordered on fraud. He had been inflating property values, bribing inspectors, and cutting corners on construction in ways that endangered future residents. The Parkview Heights development that I had worked on was one of several projects with serious problems hidden beneath the surface. When Catherine shared this information with me, I felt a chill run down my spine. My name was on those architectural drawings. My professional reputation was tied to buildings that might not be safe. Victor and Claire's affair had nearly ruined my personal life, but their corruption could have destroyed my career and put innocent people at risk. I made a decision that Valentine's Day, sitting alone in my brother's apartment, that I was not going to be a passive victim in this story. I was going to fight back, but I was going to do it the right way. No revenge schemes or dirty tricks. Just the truth, delivered to the people who needed to hear it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of carefully coordinated actions. Catherine filed for divorce and, as part of the proceedings, subpoenaed financial records that exposed Victor's fraudulent business practices. I reached out to my firm's ethics committee with concerns about the Parkview Heights project, triggering an internal review that eventually led to a formal investigation. Claire, meanwhile, found herself increasingly isolated as the consequences of her choices began to cascade. Lesson 8 was one I hadn't expected to learn. Lesson 8. Sometimes the universe delivers consequences you never could have planned. About 6 weeks after I had walked out of that apartment, Claire's carefully constructed world began to collapse in ways that had nothing to do with my direct actions. Victor, facing a divorce, a criminal investigation, and the potential loss of his family fortune, did what cowards always do. He abandoned Claire completely. He told her that she had been nothing but a distraction, that he had never intended to leave his wife for someone of her social standing. He cut off all contact and focused entirely on protecting his own assets. Claire called me in tears one evening, begging to talk. I almost didn't answer. but something made me want to hear what she had to say. Maybe it was closure I was seeking. Maybe it was simply the satisfaction of hearing her finally face reality. Nathan, please, you have to understand, she sobbed through the phone. Victor used me. He promised me everything, and now he's thrown me away like garbage. I was stupid. I made terrible mistakes. But I never meant for things to go this far. You never meant to get caught, I corrected her. That's not the same thing as not meaning for things to go this far. You planned to marry me for my money and then leave me once you had extracted enough value. You told Victor exactly how you were going to manipulate me. That wasn't a mistake. That was a calculated scheme that you executed over 4 years of my life. I know, but there's nothing else to say, Claire. You made your choices. Victor made his, and now you're both facing the consequences. I feel sorry for you genuinely because I think you've built your entire identity around this pursuit of wealth and status that has left you completely empty inside. But I can't help you. And honestly, I wouldn't even if I could. Whatever happens to you now is a result of your own actions. I hope you learn from it. I really do. But I'm not going to be part of your life ever again. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time, processing what I felt. The anger had mostly faded by then, replaced by something closer to pity. Claire had destroyed her entire life chasing something that was never real, and now she was left with nothing. Lesson 9 came gradually over the months that followed. Lesson 9. Healing is not linear, and it's okay to take the time you need. Even though I had handled the situation with as much integrity as I could muster, the pain didn't disappear overnight. There were mornings when I woke up and forgot for a moment that my entire life had changed. There were evenings when I felt so lonely that I almost called Claire just to hear a familiar voice. There were nights when the anger returned with such intensity that I couldn't sleep. I started seeing a therapist, something I probably should have done years earlier. She helped me understand that Claire's betrayal, while devastating, had revealed truths about myself that I needed to face. I had been so desperate for love that I had ignored obvious warning signs. I had sacrificed my own needs and boundaries to accommodate someone who was using me. I had defined my worth by my relationship status rather than by my own character and accomplishments. The relationship with Claire didn't fail because you weren't enough, my therapist told me. It failed because Claire was incapable of genuine love and connection. Her inability to see your worth doesn't diminish that worth. It only reveals her limitations. Those words took months to truly believe, but eventually they took root. The 10th lesson arrived alongside an unexpected development. Lesson 10. Justice has many forms, and sometimes the most satisfying comes when you're not even trying for it. About 8 months after the breakup, I received a call from a journalist who was working on an investigative piece about Victor Langley's business practices. She wanted to interview me about my experience working on Parkview Heights and what I had observed about the project's management. I agreed to the interview, providing factual information about the irregularities I had witnessed without embellishing or sensationalizing. The resulting article, published in a major Chicago newspaper, exposed a pattern of fraud and negligence that went far beyond what I had known. Victor was facing criminal charges. His family's company was being sued by multiple parties. His reputation in Chicago real estate was completely destroyed. And Claire, who had bet everything on her relationship with Victor, was mentioned in the article as one of several women he had allegedly used and discarded over the years. The journalist had found others with similar stories. Claire wasn't even special in her victimization. She was just one more pawn in Victor's game, a game she had thought she was winning until she realized she had never been a player at all. Claire's mother, Patricia Harrison, called me about a month after that article was published. I had met her several times during my relationship with Claire and had always sensed her disapproval of me, her barely concealed belief that her daughter could do better. "Mr. Brooks, this is Patricia Harrison," she said, her voice tight with barely concealed anger. "I'm calling to inform you that Claire has been hospitalized for what the doctors are calling a nervous breakdown. She's been telling everyone who will listen that you destroyed her life, that you conspired against her, that you turned people against her out of spite." "I'm sorry to hear that Claire is struggling," I said carefully. "But I didn't destroy her life. She made choices that had consequences. I simply told the truth when it was appropriate to do so. You had no right to involve yourself in Victor Langley's affairs or to contact his wife. Mrs. Harrison, your daughter was planning to marry me under false pretenses and then divorce me for financial gain while conducting an affair with a married man. I discovered this because I overheard her explicitly describing this plan. Everything that has happened since then has been a direct consequence of her own actions, not mine. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. Claire always was ambitious, she said quietly. Maybe too ambitious. I pushed her to reach higher, to never settle, to always want more. I thought I was helping her. Maybe I created a monster instead. I don't know what you created, Mrs. Harrison, but whatever happens to Claire now is between her and the consequences of her own choices. I wish her well, genuinely, but I'm not responsible for her life, and I'm not going to pretend that I am. I hung up the phone feeling unexpectedly sad. Patricia Harrison was not a good person by any stretch, but in that moment she had sounded like a mother watching her child face the results of a lifetime of misguided values. It didn't change what Claire had done, but it humanized her in a way that made me uncomfortable. Lesson 11 came from that unexpected moment of empathy. Lesson 11: you can acknowledge someone's humanity while still holding them accountable for their choices. Claire was not a villain from a movie, a one-dimensional antagonist with no motivations beyond evil. She was a person who had been shaped by specific circumstances, expectations, and values that had led her to make terrible choices. Understanding that didn't excuse what she had done. It didn't minimize the pain she had caused me, but it helped me let go of the anger that had been consuming me. The final lesson, Lesson 12, took the longest to learn but was ultimately the most important. Lesson 12: the best revenge is a life well lived, not in spite but in genuine happiness and growth. It's been 3 years since that Tuesday afternoon when I walked in on Claire and discovered the truth about our relationship. In that time, I have rebuilt my life in ways I never thought possible. I left my old firm and started my own architectural practice with a focus on sustainable, ethical development. I found love again with a woman named Sarah, who I met through my therapist's recommendation to try new activities. She's a nature photographer completely different from anyone I've ever dated, and she loves me in a way that I finally recognize as genuine. I don't think about Claire often anymore, but when I do, it's without the burning anger that used to consume me. She made her choices, she faced consequences, and I moved on to build something better than anything I could have had with her. The last I heard, Claire had moved back in with her mother after her breakdown. She was working a low-level job at a small PR firm, a far cry from the empire she had planned to build. Victor Langley was convicted of fraud and sentenced to prison time, his family fortune decimated by legal fees and civil settlements. Catherine Langley divorced him and donated most of her settlement to housing charities, a quiet act of penance for the role her family's money had played in hurting people. As for me, I got married last year. Sarah and I had a small ceremony on the beach, surrounded by people who genuinely loved us. My brother Danny was my best man. Melissa and her husband came from Chicago. It was nothing like the elaborate affair I had planned with Claire, but it was perfect in its authenticity. The lessons I learned from Claire's betrayal changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm more careful with trust now, but not closed off. I'm more aware of warning signs, but not paranoid. I'm more protective of my boundaries, but not rigid. The experience didn't make me bitter. It made me wiser. If you're listening to this and you're going through something similar, if you've just discovered that someone you loved was using you, manipulating you, betraying you, I want you to know that the pain you're feeling is not permanent. The confusion will eventually clear, the anger will subside, and on the other side of this darkness, there's a version of you that's stronger, smarter, and better than you are right now. Don't let them destroy you. Don't let their betrayal define your worth. And don't waste years of your life seeking revenge in ways that will only poison your own soul. Instead, document the truth. Protect yourself legally and financially. Let consequences unfold naturally. And then focus all of your energy on building a life so beautiful that their memory fades into irrelevance. That's what I did. That's what Claire's betrayal taught me. And that's the lesson I hope you take from my story. My name is Nathan Brooks. I was deceived by someone I loved completely. I discovered the truth just days before I was going to propose. And I survived. Not just survived, actually, I thrived. That's the final lesson, the one that matters most. You will get through this. No matter how dark things seem right now, no matter how devastating the betrayal feels, you will emerge on the other side as someone stronger. The person who betrayed you tried to take your future. Don't let them win. Build a future so bright that it blinds anyone who ever doubted your worth. That's what I did, and if I can do it, so can you.